All right, guys, let's get started. Today, we're meeting to discuss another very significant grant that came by the forum lately. We're going to give Laine team and Michael, who's representing them today, the opportunity to talk about it, the opportunity to share with you guys the ins and outs of what they're planning on doing and why it's going to be beneficial for us. Keep in mind that, just like always, you can drop questions for us that we will redirect to them, or otherwise ask them directly on Discord. That's also fine. So first of all, Michael, thank you very, very much for making the time. We also have Adam with us today. York is going to come in a little bit later, but without further ado, take it away, Michael. Tell us a bit about who you are and what you have in store.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Aaron. So my name is Michael and I represent Laine. So we're a software development company primarily based in Cape Town in South Africa, but we also have a team in India. So today we're presenting a grant proposal to develop a analytics and alerting tool and an API for SSV operators. So not strictly an explorer, but something along those lines, just to create more transparency and visibility over the network and the nodes that are operating on the network and who's operating them and how to kind of measure their quality and choose who you want to deposit your validators with. So just about us briefly, we're a software development company that was founded in 2014. So our background is really in Web 2, before Web 3 came along. As I mentioned, based in South Africa and India. Most of our experience has been building kind of REST APIs, web applications, managing associated servers, databases, that kind of stuff. Since beginning of last year, we've been pivoting into Web 3, partially as infrastructure operators. So we operate validators on Solana and Velas and are a verified operator on SSV. Started an SSV operator in November last year. At the moment, we're one of the top 20 validators on Solana with about 1% of stake. So a lot of our focus has been on that side and building tools on that front. But for us, the future is multi-chain, and that's why we've also been seeing what's happening with SSV. So kind of what our interest in SSV is, it's kind of an innovative solution to how staking works on Ethereum, especially with the merge coming and the slashing and all the kind of considerations with running a validator on Ethereum. It's a very nice, elegant approach to it, which just kind of enables a more stable network as a whole, because you're distributing the validator across multiple operators. And the future, we're not maximalists for any chain. Ethereum, I think, is going to move kind of into a role of kind of a very stable, long-term player that is the backbone of kind of Web 3, and that's something that we want to be part of and contribute to where we can. And we've enjoyed interacting with the SSV team on Discord, on Telegram, operating the node, learning about running an exporter node, and feel that that's an area where we can contribute to. So in terms of what we're proposing exactly, so essentially it's a website that will provide an overview of the current status of the network, where you can easily view all the different operators and their key statistics, kind of helping users understand the network, identify operators that they want to choose, that they want to deposit validators to, really showing the performance and finding new ways to display metrics beyond just a simple performance score or active, inactive, but kind of more in-depth measures over time, things like uptime and their attestation scores and stuff like that. And just helping to kind of promote smaller operators as well, so that you don't have a few operators accumulating a lot of validators and this kind of centralization of validators. So feeding into that as well. And then also allowing users to set up alerts so they can actually monitor their validators. So if the operator becomes kind of unstable, goes offline for a long period of time, they can get an email or a Telegram message or something that just informs them about it. It helps keep operators accountable, and it helps validators ensure that they are also, getting good performance from their operators. And another big part of this, what we want to kind of open up to the community, is building an API that will then allow other builders to really easily plug in and get data about operators, about the performance, about the validators, about the network as a whole, and build on top of that without having to run their own exporter nodes or plug into the on-chain data. So kind of an abstraction layer that will make it really easy to kind of plug in and build stuff on top of it, and just kind of help build up that ecosystem. And in terms of our experience, we've built something along these lines in the past on Solana, which is essentially a dashboard that provides kind of a detailed performance view of a validator with historical data and details on their uptime, their performance in the current epoch, their performance over time, and also measures of decentralization. And all of this combined into a single score that we've created, which takes over a dozen different metrics. So, this is a look at this kind of score, and this is something we want to create for SSV as well, where we kind of can help users identify good operators by creating a simple way to measure it, but allowing them to see the detail of that measurement and how it is created, the calculation behind it, and kind of just taking everything and putting it together to kind of determine who are the best operators right now that you can deposit your validators with. And then, the alerting option. So, having multiple channels right now, for instance, on that side, we've got Telegram, email, Soulflare, which is a wallet. So you actually get the alerts in the wallet. And other stuff we've thought about is doing things like webhooks, Discord, direct messages, Slack alerts, SMS, although there's a cost to that. So figuring that the economics out is a challenge. And kind of then you can just say like, okay, if my operator has missed 12 attestations, or if my operator has been offline for 6 hours, send me an alert. And then you can kind of just stay on top of that performance, because it's going to affect your finances as well. One of the challenges, the biggest challenge we've identified in building on SSV, is the lack of a kind of standardized metadata standard or format at the moment. The on-chain data relating to operators is quite limited. It's pretty much just the address and a name. So we'd like to kind of attach to this proposal, but somewhat separate and really just a community effort, kind of create a discussion and find a solution to create a standardized metadata format. And there's different ways of going about it. If you want to store it on-chain or have an on-chain pointer to an off-chain location. So one possible solution that we've thought of is kind of using this well-known pattern that has been becoming more popular, where a operator can just sign a message on-chain pointing to a website that they control, and then on that website they can publish metadata relating to their operator, which then can be looked up. So that would be one way of going about it, but there are many other solutions as well. So we just want to open the door to this discussion, because I think that's a problem we need to solve to build the site that we envision. And at the same time, it should be something that everyone agrees on, that other sites can then also use, and we create a standard that is open to everyone.
Right, so this is similar to how you can add metadata to a Solana validator, I take it. That's where it's coming
well,
from.
not at the moment, but this is one kind of proposal of going forward how they want to do it.
Yes.
At the moment, some metadata is on-chain, and some is off-chain using Keybase, which is a third-party service.
Yep.
But having a dependency on a third party isn't ideal. And recently, like their SSL certificate expired for 3 days, and
Nice.
yeah, so it created a big headache. But also, the logo, for instance, you can't store on chain because of the data requirement. The store. So yeah. So this is one way of possibly doing it, but there would be other solutions. Keybase is also a potential solution, but it has that pitfall of being a third party, which you don't really want. Yeah. In terms of the infrastructure requirements for the site that we're proposing, we would need to run an exporter node, which we already have been doing. We've been trialing this out for the last month together with the SSV team, just getting a feel for running the node and the reliability and accessing that data and how to pull it out. And then we would run a backend, which is basically an indexer and an API and a database, where we index the data and format it, process it, and then make it accessible via API. And then a front end which consumes the API to render itself, essentially. And then the details of the grant are basically we estimate about 3 months for design and development. The grant includes the transition to mainnet from testnet v2. Obviously, if there are like major architectural differences that are completely unforeseen, we have to evaluate how much effort that would require in kind of transitioning that. But I mean, we don't want to build something that dies with testnet. So really the goal is, of course, to take this to mainnet. And the total grant is 55,000, which will be in 2 payments, and we're not asking for any upfront payment. That's pretty much all from our side at the moment.
That sounds great. First of all, thank you. That summarizes everything pretty neatly. If you don't mind me starting the questioning phase myself, obviously, I'm sure Adam and Yorick have questions about it as well. So to make sure I understand, so you essentially, the product or the proposition that you're making is a twofold one. One would be something that a simple user or day-to-day average Joe would be able to access the interface and see the results that you displayed. And at the same time, you'll be offering an API endpoint for developers to plug into and then display. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Are both of those planned, or are you intending on keeping them as public goods, or are you planning at some point to charge or fees or fixed costs for them?
At the moment, no decision has been made on that, and I don't really foresee us charging for either directly. The possible monetization could come if down the line, and we mentioned this in our forum post, in a phase 2, we offer the option of picking your operators and depositing a validator from the site, where we add on a small fee for that service. But at this point, we haven't kind of made a determination that, okay, we want to charge a fee for the API in future or something like that. And the idea really, the whole concept of the API is to enable that to be open to the public. But that's something we can also formalize and state on the forum or something before we kind of go to a vote, that it would be always free or something.
Awesome. So just as reference, the tools that you've built for Solana, specifically the stake wheel, it's called, correct? Right?
Yeah.
Is that also a public good, open and available for anyone who wants to take part?
Yes. So it's not open source yet. It will be open sourced in the next month or 2. The front end, at least. We haven't decided yet about the back end. The API is open to the public. We haven't published the docs for it yet, but we've shared it kind of directly with those that have been interested in it. But yeah, that will be public as well, yes.
Great. So just one last follow-up question, and I'll let the others ask some questions as well. I don't want to take up all of the time. So just so to make sure I understand this correctly. So at the moment, you represent or you manage about 1% of the total validator or the total stake on Solana, correct?
Yes.
So I'm assuming that at some point down the line, you'll also want to offer your services for Ethereum staking. If that's correct.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not really one-to-one comparable. So when we say we hold 1% of the stake, it's not our stake. So the way validators on Solana work are actually more like full nodes on Ethereum, and then individual stakers deposit their stake to us. So we currently operate a node on SSV, an operator, and planning to continue doing that. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Essentially meaning that down the line, that activity will also scale up on Ethereum staking as well.
Yes, yeah, no, definitely.
All right, understood. Okay, I'll leave some time for the others to ask some questions as well. I'll mute myself first.
I'm curious to ask a bit about the team. If you can share a bit about your backgrounds, how many people are currently working in the team, and kind of what made you build Solana implementation. Was this something you developed internally for your own use and then externalized it, or what was your kind of journey there?
Yeah, so the total development team is about 10 people, spread across 4 or 5 different projects at the moment. So traditionally, or historically, we've been a company that has built services provided software as a service, building for clients, not building our own products, and more in the Web2 space. And my background is basically in kind of combination of web development and business studies, personally. So I started the company in 2014 and built it up from there. And with Solana, we kind of started with the validator node, with operating the validator, and being involved in the community over time and kind of seeing the needs in terms of access to data and even us as a validator, the data I wanted to see personally kind of led to building this and the alerting, because there was kind of recurring situations where validators would have very bad performance, but delegators weren't aware of it, because once you've staked, it's very difficult to actually track the performance of the validator that you've staked with. So the start of Stakewiz was on the alerting side. So it was just straight up alerting if the validator is offline for a long period. Then we added the commission alerting, because on Solana, validators can set a commission, so they can basically increase their commission and essentially steal money if they do it unethically, depending on how, of course. So it started from that and then kind of evolved towards the analytics, and now moving towards actual staking and on-chain interaction. So it's a combination of data that was valuable to us, functionality that was valuable to us and the community, hopefully, and of course also as a way to engage the community to stake with us.
Got it. And what was your start in SSV? How do you hear about the project, and what's your kind of journey with respect to everything you're doing in the network today?
Yeah, so it started around November last year. One of the SSV team members reached out to me, I think on Discord, or might have been on Telegram, and introduced me to the project. It was the first time I'd heard about it. And Ethereum staking is a space that had interested me personally for quite some time. And of course, the threshold is quite high with 32 ETH. And it's a bit different because you kind of start your validator, but then you just kind of leave it. You're not that involved with community and stuff. And with SSV, I saw there was like really a community around with the operators and the validators, and the development that was happening was very interesting to me. So we set up an SSV node. I feel like it was in November, might have been early December last year. And then not too much was happening until, things heated up with the testnet, of course. And the Discord started getting more active, and kind of the conversation just accelerate it from there.
Great. I'm going to ask a question that is something that comes up constantly in DMs or mostly when people try to vet your integrity and make sure that you're doing things for the right reasons, right? So I noticed when I was reviewing StakeWiz that there's a big emphasis on the scoring system. So
yes.
Giving or being as impartial as possible, and then taking the relevant factors into consideration. I read a bit into it, obviously not my field of expertise, but from what I've gathered, it's a balance of a few things. So could you talk a bit about what or how you're planning on doing it for SSV, if it's any different?
Well, it will be different because the data available and the metrics that matter are different with SSV. And I'm still trying to figure out what metrics are even available. So things like IP location, like where the server is located and stuff like that, is quite important in terms of geographic decentralization, but it's not always clear with SSV. I'm not sure if that's actually data we can independently verify. We can have the operator report it, but I'm not sure if we can actually verify that that's the IP that they're operating from. So the data will be different. In terms of the scoring system, we run a validator, so we are also scored by our own site. So obviously there is a conflict of interest. We've tried to keep it fair, and in fact, if you look at the score right now, our score is really low because we have a high amount of stake, and the site heavily favors smaller validators to try and promote, staking with smaller validators. So that's really all I can point to in that regard. The actual scoring system and the weighting of the system is fully published on the site, and whenever it changes, the version number will change. So you can, for each score in time, you can actually point back to what the weighting was at that point in time. It's not all easily visible on the site at this point. We'd like to make it like that, but on the back end, we have that data. At the moment, what you can see is the current, like what the weighting is for the current score. We haven't published kind of historic weightings. So we do have all of that public in kind of to make that transparency possible. With SSV, scoring is something that is important that we'd like to introduce. It might not be as big of a part of the site or as in depth. That kind of matters on the quality of the metrics we can access. You don't want to over-engineer a scoring system either, and StakeWiz maybe is even verging on that to some degree. But it's the thing with Solana is that there are a lot of existing scoring sites, and they all, in some form or another, have all of those metrics, but none of them have put them all together. So that was kind of where we started. So I think the goal is really to find a scoring system that meets the objective, and the objective should be to identify operators that perform well, that perform reliably over a long period of time, and operators that aren't too big. So you want to distribute the stake, but you don't want to also push out operators that have just started up and they don't have a track record yet. So it's finding that balance, which hopefully we'll be able to do.
One of the things one of these suggestions that came out of the community that I liked the most was suggestions. So let's say, down the line, once the matrices are in place, once you know exactly what factors to take into or how to weight them inside that score, can you suggest another operator for me? So it would ask you preliminary questions like how risk averse or what is your risk appetite? How much money are you willing to spend? How important client diversity is for you, for instance, geolocation, like you mentioned, whatever it may be, and then sort of create a cluster that would be dedicated, or sort of like an Apple suggestion for the next songs, like at Spotify, just like that, but for operators. So I think the potential or the growth trajectory here is limitless. Yeah.
I really don't want to keep pointing to the Solana example. Unfortunately, it's the best example we have. but we're actually building that exact functionality at the moment. Yeah, so
Awesome.
we're building at the moment you can stake directly with a validator. So we're busy building the functionality where you can select multiple validators and then in a single transaction stake with multiple validators. And then we'll introduce buckets. So you can say, okay, I want a bucket of decentralized validators based on geography, or I want a bucket of validators that have operated at least for 20 epochs, or I want a bucket of validators that has at least this high of a metric in this or this category. Definitely that's the direction that this would go.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Down the line, you can create ETF almost like clusters in the sense that you can take European operators, South American and so on. So it's very, very cool. All right.
Also, I don't know if I can ask a question actually, and this might be off topic if you want to edit this out. But in the future, will it be possible, I assume it would be, that you can change the operators assigned to your validator?
100%.
Yeah. 100%.
Would it be possible to delegate the authority to do so to a smart contract or third party?
You mean by changing it in the UI, you want to delegate it to someone instead of me replacing the operator?
I think what he's saying is, can his website choose operators on behalf of people?
Yes. Yeah.
That's a great question. Maybe, I can share some of the information that is planned out for how it's going to look like. You will definitely have the option to switch up the operator that would require a transaction, be it one or a few. That is up to us to decide or build towards, essentially. And I can also share that you've mentioned it briefly in your presentation where you would like an alert once, or in the case one of the operators changes the fees. That is definitely something that there has to be a threshold implemented. For instance, a time frame during which the fees cannot be changed until the necessary changes are made, and other limitations. But to answer your question, I wouldn't 100% know to say yes or no as a definite yes or no, but I suspect that it would be a possibility.
Yeah, I guess you'd have to kind of create an intermediary smart contract that would split kind of the operator authority and the withdrawal authority.
Right. Even though that by the nature of this is all Ethereum layer 1, you're looking at not unsubstantial gas fees here.
Yeah.
This isn't Solana. It's not 0.0005 Sol.
My mindset is of course coming from that. So and it's something I'm wrapping my head around, because the whole architecture of the chain of the L1 is different. Because Solana is accounts based, and but on Solana, stake accounts have separate withdraw and stake authorities. So this would be possible. So
Solana is DPoS, right? It's delegated proof of stake. There is no such thing here.
Yeah.
Rather different design.
Yeah. But you can always obviously prompt a user to come and sign a transaction.
Yes, you can absolutely do that. You can prompt a user and say, hey, we detected that, crypto manufacturer is letting the site down. How about you stake with Laine? You can absolutely do that.
Yeah. However, on the withdraw side, since that whole section of the operation isn't a part of the process that the key undergoes, then I guess that the withdrawal would be different than what you'd expect in Solana. So not 100% compatible yet. It's a very fair question. I know that in terms of metadata and whether we would go down an on-chain direction or off-chain direction has been quite a difficult task to tackle, specifically in our case, because we don't hold any of the data, we don't store any of it, and we can't reference anything that happened in the past unless predefined.
Unless you've indexed it.
Exactly, which we don't. So it was only from our perspective, just to go back, answer your question, it was a matter of timing, or a matter of maturity. until the ecosystem is mature enough to create solutions like this, because regardless of whether the solution would have been a fully BI amazing tool that gives you all the possibility to analyze your data or not, it has to remain impartial. Being impartial and transparent in this particular case could be even more important than displaying the accurate data from the get-go, right? So from our perspective, the way we see things, at least from my side, from the community management, people rather see, or the users rather see, progress, improvement towards something that they suggested or are building towards, and then you implementing not even all of it, but some of it, goes a very, very long way. So yeah, that answers your question.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I see here transition from testnet to mainnet. Are you intending to keep running this on testnet for a longer period of time?
It really depends on the future of testnet.
Okay.
I don't imagine that it would be a very high maintenance burden to do that. If we're operating, I mean, even now with StakeWiz, we have multiple environments. It's just different sets of data, but architecturally, ideally, it would be almost identical. And then we could, yes. So if you wanted it on testnet, we could keep running it on testnet.
Okay. Might be useful even just to try new features, so you have a way to do that without going into production right away. Although test and prod is a time-honored tradition.
The thing is, because it's primarily displaying data, not really interacting on-chain. So with StakeWiz, we have a staging site, but the data is still mainnet data.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a separate source for the data.
That makes sense.
Unless you're changing the source, like if you're changing the way that your contracts are working, then of course we want to test that on testnet.
Right, got it.
I do have another question, if you don't mind me taking it back to the actual value proposition. So I keep on thinking about the API as a tool for developers. At the end of the day, not everyone can use it. The network in itself is going to be positioning itself in a more developer-oriented state of mind. So I do see a lot of value in it. I know that some of the use case or current operators use Grafana dashboards or other tools that help them display internal processes. So I'm just wondering, from the development perspective, from putting on my developer cap, I'm guessing the parameters or the info that I need to see or would like to see is very different than what the end user normal staker would want to see in the dashboard, right?
It's no, sorry.
No, I think you got the question. Yeah.
Look, if you're comparing it to a Grafana dashboard that an operator uses on a DevOps side, I don't think that's something that the API could or should cater to, because by the time you're reading the data on the API, it's abstracted through so many layers and points of failure that you really don't want to be depending on that to monitor your real-time performance as an operator. The goal is more to kind of create a curated and more developer-friendly and easily accessible source of data. And our architecture requires us to build an API for our own use already. So it's a natural extension to open up that same API that we're going to be using. And someone could basically build a copy of the entire website and UI on their own using the same API.
A white source kind of solution,
some stuff might not work in terms of like stuff that writes to the database, of course, but in terms of reading the data and those things, really, it's there. Why shouldn't it be open? And if you can basically just call an endpoint a REST API endpoint and get a list of operators and the key metadata about them, that'll make the lives of a lot of developers a lot easier. Sure, they can go and run an exporter node or find a exporter node as a service if those at some point will exist. So it's not solving an impossible problem, but it might make things a bit easier for some people.
Understood. All right. That pretty much wraps up my questions. Adam, Yorick, do you have any other questions to ask Michael?
I'm good.
I have one question. So you have a one-time grant amount here. How do you envision handling the ongoing kind of maintenance, development, just infrastructure costs, and so on?
Yeah, that's a good question, and one I don't have a very good answer to at this point. There is a phase 2 that was mentioned in our forum post, but something that I don't want to include in this grant at this point, which is basically adding the validator deposit option and, maybe more logic around that. So there's obviously a possibility of a follow-up grant proposal, which obviously there's no guarantee it would be voted yes on.
Mm-hmm.
But like I mentioned as well, with that, then there's the possibility of kind of charging fees and stuff. But for us, again, if we're operating an operator, this to some degree is also an effort that helps us build our brand in the space and kind of create some publicity for our operator. But yeah, long term, we'd have to evaluate what the implications there are. Hopefully, like with this amount, we could probably run it for about 2 years before we really have to evaluate on a path forward.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
2 years should be long enough for the network to be where it should be.
I had 2, but still, yeah.
Yeah, 2 years, yeah.
Yeah, the year there. Good job.
Like the commitment is for 12 months, of course, as part of the grant, but
right.
It's not a hard, like, oh, we're going to shut it down or anything. The goal is to keep this going and evolve with the network. And that's hard to say where we're going to be in 12 or 24 months.
All right, that's a great answer. Before we wrap things up, just a few updates. On our end, we've been working on a way for teams like yours to display their work and update the community on what they've been doing, what kind of important information they discovered, or what needs to be, run by the community and so on to make sure everyone's aligned. So you will have a dedicated Notion page for it. You'll be able to update everything that you do directly there. It'll be shared with the community. We will share it with you when it's ready. It's in the final stages of it. Stuff like this video or snippets from this video or updates to your forum or updates to the proposal, whatever it is, can and will be shared there alongside the Discord group as well. So yeah, users really like when they get constant updates, regardless of the size of them. It could be a small bug fix for all they care. It goes a long way.
Yeah, we actually do have a Discord as well. I don't know if you want to keep it on kind of your channels.
It is your page to add whatever social channels you wish to add. It's completely open source. It's funny because we were hoping to at one point be able to save the metadata in an on-chain way for that sort of hub as well. At the moment, it's sort of application form. It is open source, but it's sort of manual input of the application. But down the line, we're definitely considering metadating it out for sure. Yeah. All right, that's it from my end. Thank you so much for joining, Michael. I really look forward to seeing where this goes. I think that a lot of our developers, especially the new grants coming in, and we'll be hosting more calls so you can listen in on what they're planning on doing, definitely need something of this sort. So I know that from our perspective, when you're focused on building a tool, building all the side tools or the third-party integration that you need is usually pushed to the side. But in this specific case, it's something that is extremely needed and important in our community. So the more the merrier. Thanks for your time, Michael. Much appreciated. We'll share the video with the community in a couple of days and redirect all the questions we get to you.
I look forward.
That's it.
Thank you,
Michael.
Thanks, Yorick. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Michael. We'll be in touch.
Thanks,
Enjoy your day.
Michael.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.